see you guys in the dark.
I had just moved out of a share house in the suburbs and into my own shitty one-bedroom apartment in the city. I'm a male, and at the time, I was around 25 years old. My apartment, while old and small, was located about 500 meters from one of the most popular night spots in the inner city. As I was in my mid-20s and out on my own, this was the perfect place for me. This was because my friends and I were quite social and would frequent bars and nightclubs in the city, and the taxi fares were starting to add up. Also, this new apartment was close to my work, so it made sense. I got settled in right away and invited my friends over to pre-drink before hitting the clubs. Due to the limited space in the apartment, this meant that some of my friends were inside, and some were drinking on the walkway just out front. We had the music up, and had just started drinking, but between songs I could hear the couple next door arguing. Now, the apartment was old and shitty, which meant thin walls too, so I pressed an ear to the wall in order to listen in. I hadn't met any of my new neighbors at this time, as I didn't take long to move in, and I really didn't see anyone during, but I was curious. Judging from what I could determine while eavesdropping, they were a gay couple in their early 30s. One of the men were yelling on the other side to go to the next door and tell us to just keep it down. The other was arguing that it was just a housewarming and to let it go for the night. Since I didn't want to cause any trouble, I marshaled everyone outside to start making our way to the nightclubs, leaving my new neighbors in peace. Later that night, I came home alone as I was tired from the move. I decided to let my friends carry on and party without me. I arrived at my door and proceeded to fumble around for my keys when I looked up to see a man standing on the walkway in front of the next apartment, smoking a cigarette. He was tall and thin with brown, oily hair. I noticed that he also had a cut lip and a faded but still visible black eye. I said good day. Sorry about the noise earlier, correctly assuming that he was my neighbor. He replied, "Nah, you're all right, mate. I'm Chris," and then he shook my hand. I noticed his knuckles were red and a little bit scratched up, so I knew something was off. I apologized for the noise and said that I hope I didn't cause any trouble for you. He withdrew his hand and with a soft but crackling voice said, "Nah, it's okay. Rick just gets a bit cranky sometimes. I'm used to it." With that, I finished off the conversation and told Chris that I'd see him later. It was about 2 a.m. at this point, and I just wanted to sleep. But I couldn't help worrying about the potential domestic abuse going on next door. I decided to keep an eye on it for now, as I didn't have all the information. All I knew was he could have gotten into a fight with someone else. As the weeks passed, I noticed that my new neighbors got drunk regularly and would argue almost every time. I could tell that Rick was the domestic one, as his voice was a lot deeper, and Chris seemed to be afraid of him during their shouting matches. This is why I kept my distance and never really socialized with them. I would even overhear them arguing about me, and that Rick thought that Chris liked me. I could just tune all of this out with headphones and video games, not to mention an active social life and full time to work to keep me occupied. I did find myself avoiding having guests over because of the neighbors. I would opt to meet people out at their apartments, as their arguments could be quite upsetting. This was working out fine enough for a while until Christmas Eve that same year. I was arriving home after having some last-minute Christmas shopping. I was getting ready for a night of present wrapping as I was to visit my family the following day. As I arrived home, I noticed 2 police cars outside, and Anna, an Asian woman who lived a few apartments up from Chris, was screaming. I asked her what was happening, and all she said was, "It's just so sad," while sobbing. I could see 3 officers trying to restrain somebody, and there was blood on their uniforms. I came just a little bit closer to see Chris's oily brown hair in the center of the affray. His face was bleeding from his jaw, where he had been apparently slashed by something sharp. They got him to his feet, and I could see that his cheek had been cut so deep that the skin was flapping open as he struggled and resisted with the police. I recoiled in shock and went to confront Anna, who was crying uncontrollably at this point. Suddenly, Rick's voice boomed out from nowhere. "You see what you've done? You fucking loser! Just kill yourself!" This frightened me, and my instinct was to get myself and Anna to safety. Even though the cops were here, they had their hands full with Chris, and I certainly didn't want to get involved in such an ugly fight where knives were involved. Anna refused to come with me and said that she would be fine. I looked around to see where Rick was, as he kept yelling at Chris the whole time the three cops struggled to restrain him. I could hear Chris whimpering apologetically in between. I couldn't see where Rick was, so I decided to just go to my apartment and lock the door. As I turned to go, I froze in horror as Rick's voice boomed. "Where the fuck are you going?" A deep chill went down my spine as my brain struggled to reconcile the fact that these words were coming out of Chris's mouth. I felt panic grip me as I realized that all this time, Rick and Chris were the same person. All the fighting, laughing, drinking, and carry on that I couldn't help overhearing over the last couple of months had come from one solitary person. A lonely guy in a small one-bedroom apartment. For some reason, this made me feel sick. I learned later from Anna that this wasn't the first time the police had to come out to take Chris away. Anna explained that he spends a couple of months at the local psychiatric hospital each time. His father owns the apartment, so it's where he's waiting for him when he gets out. I moved out a few months later, and while it is a sad situation for Chris, I really do feel for him. I met him one night in a club, and he seemed nice enough, good-looking and friendly. We exchanged numbers at the end of the night, and I looked forward to meeting him again. Nothing unusual. I was 18, and he was in his early 20s. I spent a lot of time in clubs, so I was comfortable with everything. About a week had passed, and we had sent a few text messages, and decided to meet up for drinks. He offered to pick me up from my house, but I didn't know him well yet. I arranged him to meet me by the entrance to a hotel on the main road near my house. We went to a pub. I had plans to meet a friend about 9, so we only stayed an hour, and he took me to where I was meeting my friend. We had a short kiss, and then left. I was glad that it was over, as he was actually not interesting. Boring, in fact. He added me on Facebook. I accepted, but didn't think we'd talk much after that. I was wrong. A month or so passed after this, and we didn't meet again until one night out in town when we met by chance. He told me that he couldn't stop thinking about me. I was drunk and foolishly kissed him, and we parted ways again. A couple of days later, it says on Facebook that he is in a relationship. At least this meant he wasn't interested in me anymore, so I thought. However, it was not long after this that he sent me a text that read, "I'm obsessed with you." I told him to stop at this point, as he had a girlfriend. He passed it off, and being flirty, and told me to get over it. For about 6 months after this, every few weeks he would text me. After the first time this happened, he sent incredibly graphic details of how he wanted to have sex with me. I deleted him on Facebook and kept asking him to stop. Sometimes he would include naked pictures too. Keep in mind, I never got further than a kiss with this guy. He texted me once about 10 months into his relationship, while on holiday with his girlfriend, and told me that he wished it was me, not her. Again, I told him to stop. Each time I turned him down, he'd get annoyed and tell me that he never wanted to speak to me again. But sure enough, it was usually less than a month, and I'd get a random naked picture again, or something like that. All the messages I could have ignored, but one night, I hadn't heard from him for a few weeks. I was home alone. Parents were on holiday. I hadn't told anyone about that. About 1 a.m., my phone rings, and it's him, so I just hang up. These texts followed. "Hey, let me in. I'm outside your house." "No, you're not. Leave me alone." "I am. I know you're alone. Let me in." Then some descriptions of sex stuff that he wanted to do. "Leave me the fuck alone. I'm not home alone anyway. You're wrong. You don't even know where I live." "I do. I'm right outside your house. Your room is the one with the red curtains." "No, it isn't. You've never been to my house. I picked you up the first time that we went out. From somewhere about a 10-minute walk away from here. You've never even been to my house." I looked out my bedroom window, and there was no one to be seen. "I just saw your curtains move. Let me in." I ran around the house. Turned all the lights at the front off. I don't know why. I guess I just thought it would put him off. "You just turned off the lights. I know you're there." I was crying now. The last text I sent was, "Leave right this second, or I'm calling the police. If I ever see you, hear from you, or have any contact with you again, I will call the police." His reply was, "You don't need to be a bitch about it. I'll just go." I didn't hear from him again, but that whole thing lasted almost 2 years, from just one very short date. I still get really nervous when I see someone who looks similar now. I still don't know how he knew where my house was, or that my parents were away that night. I can only assume that he followed me one day.
If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell for notifications on future videos and become a stalker of the night. And I'll see you next time.